What's up? Didn't see you there. My name's Wyatt Roder, and I'm back today with Schola Latini to talk to you about history. Today we're doing an introduction to Roman history, and history in Latin is historia. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start by talking about who the Romans were. So the Romans, like I said in the intro video, are just some people from modern-day Italy, specifically the region of Latium, which is about halfway down the boot, on the west coast. And they created an empire that spanned the whole Mediterranean. Now, just to talk about some themes that we'll come across in Roman history, first of all, the study of Roman history is, of course, just the chronology of the Roman state from its beginnings to its fall in the West. After the fall of the Western Empire, as we'll talk about, the rest of Roman history is generally called Byzantine history, named after the capital Byzantium/Constantinople. So the chronology, of course, is just going to consist of like the dry facts, the dates, the interesting happenings at times, and just all of the data that kind of constitutes Roman history. And then as we move to themes, one thing that you'll notice early in the Roman history is that there is a class struggle between the patricians, who for most of Roman history are the group that is endowed with much money, is more prominent in politics, etc. And then you have the plebeians, the poor people. And through that lens, a lot of Roman history, a lot of important events, I should say, in Roman history occur. Another theme that we'll explore in Roman history is its interactions with outsiders, those of Rome specifically. And this is especially important since naturally, as the Roman Empire expanded, or the Roman state, it had to incorporate outsiders. It had to make many diplomatic decisions, and eventually those choices culminated in what we understand as the Roman Empire. And naturally, of course, there's the flow and transference of power, how power exchanged hands, how we got from the monarchy to the republic to the empire, how specific people use their power to make their legacies in Roman history, etc. And then inherent to that, of course, are the political trends and intricacies that go along with Roman history. And then here we have some nice visuals, specifically the Roman Empire at 117 AD. That's when it was at its height under Trajan. Geta being murdered by Caracalla, and then some nice other things. Anyways, let's talk briefly about the evidence and the sources we have for Roman history. Now, first I'll note that Roman history is very prominent in Western thought because, first of all, Rome is in a way a major forefather of like all of Western civilization as we know it. But at the same time, there's so much data about Roman history and civilization, probably for the same reason as the former fact. And that's why it's necessary to kind of go through all this evidence briefly and talk about it. So first, we simply have literary accounts, and those are exactly how they sound. Certain authors wrote about Roman history and gave their interpretations, and thus what has survived now informs much of how we understand Roman history. At the same time, there is naturally archaeology, and this is more material evidence. It tells us really like exact information about where things were, what daily life was like in the Roman state, etc. And then, while not necessarily evidence for the history of Roman civilization, interpretation is a very important element when considering Roman history, because we have all this data on Roman history, but that's not where the exploration of Roman history ends. Many notable classicists back whenever and today are still and have interpreted history, Roman history, as we're talking about, through their own lens. And it is through all these different lenses and different interpretations that we get what we get when we try to understand Roman history. It's not just basic data, it's kind of piecing that together and then filling in the blanks and understanding it. So now, briefly, to kind of build upon the foundation of knowledge for history of Rome, we're going to look at the progression of the Roman state through the times territorially. So this first slide indicates the extent of Rome's territory when it was just a small city-state in Latium. Specifically, this is after the conquests in the early republic of the Aequi, Volsci, Sabines, and other nearby peoples in this kind of smaller region of Italy. As we can see, the Tiber River is flowing down here, and Rome is the star on the Tiber right there. So this is about in the like 4th, 5th, and 6th centuries BCE, more or less. That's probably not exact, but you get the idea. Now, the next period we can kind of look at geographically in terms of territory is Rome's conquest of Italy. And this occurred closer to the 3rd, 2nd, and 1st centuries BCE, when Rome kind of expanded out of Latium, fought wars against Pyrrhus of Epirus, the First Punic War, and some tribes to the north, and thereby gained control of most of Italy. Now we have the conquest of Greece, which was around the 2nd century BC and 1st century BC, and Spain, for that matter, over here. And that is exactly how it sounds. This is where we really start seeing how Rome interacts with other prominent nations. Carthage, of course, we saw that in the last slide with Sicily. They fought Rome fought with Carthage in the First Punic War, but Rome also fights with Greece, and then even some Near Eastern states over here, especially those in Asia Minor. And then Rome will have a large presence in Egypt and Judea soon after this, as we'll see in the next slide. And then, of course, Rome kind of, as a continuation of the conquests in northern Italy, moved over into Spain and conquered a lot of the tribes there, as well as gaining some territory in Africa after the Third Punic War. So now we have the early empire, which are the conquests of Augustus, specifically got Rome to this point. Augustus and his generals, Tiberius Germanicus Drusus, etc., Agrippa. And here we can kind of see that the empire is nearly at its height. In fact, this area up here, kind of near modern Germany, Poland a little bit, is going to actually fall out of Roman hands soon. So interestingly enough, this is to an extent like one of the heights of Roman's territorial extent. And then, of course, like I said, big presence in Egypt, big presence in the Near East, and even a little bit of a presence above the Black Sea. This kind of grid pattern indicates client states of Rome, so not areas that Rome directly controls, but rather areas that are effectively ruled by Rome through a client king that Rome oversees. And then finally, we're going to look at the height of the empire under Trajan. Actually, not finally, but finally in terms of the extent to which Rome gets. Yes, Rome under Trajan is territorially the most vast, and we can see this here. Rome is very far to the east, in fact, all the way to this, sea body of water that I, for some reason, don't know the word. Oh, that's a gulf, right? Saudi Arabia. Anyways, yes, this is the territorial peak for Rome, and it is under the Emperor Trajan in about 117 AD. And then this, after a rather complicated series of events going from the 2nd century AD to the 5th century AD, is what Rome, or the Roman Empire, looked like just before its fall in the West. So we have, clearly a massive reduction in territory. In fact, some of this is probably not directly controlled by Rome. The stuff in the blue is controlled by other people that, at some points, to some degree, probably didn't identify themselves as Roman. And soon, this blue portion will completely collapse. It won't be considered the Roman Empire anymore, as the Goths will have fully taken control of the seat of power at Rome, with the deposition of Romulus Augustulus by Odovaker. And then over in the east, we can see what the Byzantine Empire looked like at this time, the Eastern Roman Empire, if you like to call it that. And indeed, it is quite vast, and as you may know, survives for 1,000 years past the fall of Rome, its seat being Constantinople right there. And now here is a brief timeline just to kind of get an idea of the basic events of Roman history. I'm not going to go over this since it would take far too much time, but feel free to reference it if you are interested. It's not super beautiful, but it gets the point across. With the founding of Rome notably being in 753 BCE, the mythological founding, according to Vera Rheatinus, when Romulus founds the city, and the fall of the Western Empire being in 476 AD, when Romulus Augustulus is deposed, like I said. And that is going to be the end of this video. Stay tuned for more explorations into Roman history. And that's it. See ya.